I never thought I would find myself here, standing at the crossroads of the life I had built so carefully, questioning everything I once believed to be unshakable. My marriage, my home, my role as a wife, a mother, and the heart of a family that once felt whole, these were the pillars upon which my world stood. And yet, beneath the surface of that seemingly perfect life, a quiet ache had taken root, creeping through the cracks of my soul like ivy on an old, crumbling wall. At first, I dismissed it as nothing more than fleeting restlessness. A moment of boredom. A trick of the mind. But deep down, I knew better. It started on an afternoon that should have been like any other, a summer gathering filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the scent of grilled food hanging in the air. Family meant everything to us. Our traditions were sacred, and these gatherings were stitched into the fabric of our lives, and yet, among the familiar faces, one stood out in a way I had never noticed before: Zane, my husband's cousin. He had always been there, always on the periphery, a quiet, reserved man who never sought the center of attention. But that day, something about him felt different. Or maybe it was me who had changed. As the sun dipped low, washing the sky in hues of lavender and gold, I found myself sitting with him on the porch, away from the noise of the others. At first, our conversation was light, reminiscing about past family gatherings, exchanging polite words. But then something shifted. There was a weight to his words, an honesty that drew me in. He spoke of his dreams, his failures, his struggles to find meaning in a life that often felt hollow. And in his voice, I heard something I hadn't realized I was starving for: understanding. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen. Not as a wife, not as a mother, but as a woman. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something, a spark, a tremor, a quiet stirring in the depths of my chest. And it terrified me. In the days that followed, I tried to push the memory of that evening aside, to bury it beneath the weight of my responsibilities, my marriage, my carefully structured life. But Zane lingered in my thoughts like a song I couldn't stop humming. I told myself it was nothing more than a foolish distraction, a moment of weakness. After all, my husband, Marcus, was a good man. Dependable. Kind. The sort of partner many women would envy, and yet, I couldn't deny the growing distance between us. Marriage, I had learned, was not the endless fairy tale I once imagined. It wasn't passion woven into every day or the thrill of new beginnings. It was routine. Compromise. The slow intertwining of two lives, until the lines of individuality blurred. Somewhere along the way, Marcus and I had stopped seeing each other, and Zane, he was a reminder of something I had lost. At first, it was harmless, fleeting glances across the room at another family gathering, brief conversations in the kitchen while the others were distracted. But with every stolen moment, the air between us thickened. Charged, I should have walked away, but I didn't. It was a crisp autumn evening when it finally happened. The kind of night where the air smelled of fallen leaves and the sky stretched endlessly above, speckled with stars. We had gathered at my in-laws' house for dinner. And at some point, I stepped outside for a breath of solitude. I hadn't expected to find him there, Zane, leaning against the railing of the porch, lost in thought. Our conversation started as it always did. But this time, the silences between our words spoke louder. I feel like I've been sleepwalking through my life, I admitted, the confession slipping free before I could stop it. Like I'm just going through the motions, but I'm not really living. Zane's eyes flickered with something I couldn't name. I know what you mean, he murmured. Sometimes, I wonder if this is all there is. Just existing. The air between us was electric. And when he finally turned to face me, his expression unreadable, I knew we were standing on the edge of something dangerous, something that could change everything. And then he kissed me. I should have pulled away. I should have ended it there, left that moment in the past where it belonged. But I didn't. The affair began in secret, stolen hours and whispered words. Each meeting was a rush, a reckless rebellion against the life I had built. I told myself I could control it, that I could keep the lines from blurring, but the truth has a way of catching up to you. The morning after I ended things with Zane, the world felt heavier. The weight of my betrayal pressed down on my chest, suffocating me. And I knew I couldn't keep this from Marcus any longer. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I finally told him. The kids were out, the house bathed in the golden light of autumn. "Marcus," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" He set his book down, a slight crease forming between his brows. "Of course." "What's wrong?" I sat across from him, hands clenched in my lap, my heart pounding. "I need to tell you something." And then I told him everything, the growing distance, the loneliness, the nights I had spent with Zane. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't try to justify it. I simply let the truth hang between us, raw and unfiltered. The silence that followed was unbearable. Marcus's jaw tensed, his hands gripping the edge of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "How long?" "Months," I admitted. "But it's over now. I swear to you, Marcus. I never meant to hurt you." He let out a sharp breath, then stood abruptly, pacing the room as if trying to escape the weight of my words. "I need time," he said, his voice tight. And then he walked away. In the days that followed, Marcus barely spoke to me. When he was home, he avoided me, retreating into himself. The silence between us, once a quiet comfort, became unbearable. Then, one evening, he walked into the kitchen, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said. I nodded, bracing myself. His gaze was steady. Why wasn't I enough? Tears filled my eyes. "It was never about you not being enough," I whispered. "It was about me. I felt lost. And instead of coming to you, I made the worst mistake of my life." He exhaled slowly, looking away. "I don't know if I can forgive this, Celeste." And just like that, the life I had built, the one I thought was unshakable, began to crumble. The days turned into weeks, and the silence between Marcus and me stretched like a chasm too wide to cross. At first, he avoided me completely, coming home late, locking himself in the guest room, barely saying a word unless it was about the kids. But silence wasn't the worst part. It was the way he looked at me now, like I was a stranger in our home. Like the woman he had loved for years was gone, replaced by someone he could no longer trust. One night, I found him in the living room, staring at our wedding photo. The image of us, young and full of hope, felt like a cruel reminder of what we had lost. "Do you regret it?" he asked, his voice hoarse, my breath caught. "More than anything." He didn't say anything, just nodded, his eyes dark with something unreadable. "I don't know how to move past this, Celeste. Every time I look at you, I see him." I flinched at the venom in his words. I had destroyed something sacred, and now, I was watching the man I loved unravel because of it. But the worst was yet to come. Just when I thought the worst of the storm had passed, I found out Marcus had a secret of his own. I noticed the change in him first, the late nights that became more frequent, the sudden phone calls he took in hushed tones. And then, the final blow came when I saw the name pop up on his phone, Emily. I didn't recognize it at first. But when I saw the messages, long, late-night conversations, the way he confided in her about his pain, I knew. My chest tightened as I scrolled through the words he had never spoken to me. "She listens to me. She understands. I had betrayed him first. But now, he was doing the same." I confronted him that night, my hands shaking as I held up his phone. "Who is she?" I asked. Marcus didn't even flinch. "Someone who doesn't lie to me." The words hit harder than I expected. "So, what now?" I whispered. "You get back at me by running to someone else." His jaw clenched. "I didn't plan for this to happen, Celeste. But I can't talk to you without feeling like I'm suffocating." I swallowed hard. "Are you in love with her?" Silence. That was all the answer I needed. I thought about leaving. About packing my bags and walking away before he could. But I couldn't. I had spent years building this life. I had made mistakes, terrible, unforgivable ones, but I wasn't ready to throw everything away. But Marcus, he was slipping further and further away. One evening, I found him dressed in a crisp button-down, cologne lingering in the air as he stood by the door. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Out," he said simply. "With her." He didn't answer. I felt my stomach drop. "Marcus, please." We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes, he sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. I don't know if I want to fix it, Celeste. My world crumbled around me. I had been so afraid of losing him that I didn't realize I already had. Days passed, and the distance between us became unbearable. Then, one night, he came home drunk. I had never seen him like that before, stumbling, bitter. His eyes filled with something between regret and rage. You ruined us, he slurred. You threw away everything we had. And now, I don't even know who I am without you. I swallowed back tears. Marcus, let's talk in the morning, but he shook his head. No? Let's talk now. Because I need to know, did you love him? My breath caught. I had spent so much time regretting what I did, but I never asked myself that question, and the truth was, no. I didn't love Zane, I loved Marcus, but maybe that wasn't enough anymore. The next morning, Marcus packed a bag. I need time, he said. To think. To figure out what I want. Tears streamed down my face. You're leaving me, I don't know, he admitted. But I can't stay here and pretend things are okay when they are not. And just like that, he walked out the door. I stood there, watching the man I loved disappear, knowing deep down, this might be the end. But endings, they aren't always what they seem. Sometimes, they are just the beginning of something else. The days without Marcus felt like slow torture. His absence wasn't just physical, it was emotional, psychological, a hollow space in my chest that I couldn't seem to fill. I woke up expecting to hear his voice, to feel the bed shift under his weight, but there was nothing. Just silence. He didn't call. He didn't text, and the worst part? I didn't know if he ever would. I tried to focus on the kids, to keep life moving as if everything wasn't falling apart. But at night, when the house was quiet, I let myself break. I had betrayed my husband, now, he was betraying me, and maybe we had finally reached the point of no return. It didn't take long for the rumors to start. It was at the grocery store first, 2 women standing by the produce aisle, whispering, I heard he's been seeing someone. Yeah, that woman from his office. What's her name? Emily. My grip tightened around the shopping cart. My ears buzzed. I left the store without buying anything. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at my phone, debating whether to call him. I wanted to believe he wasn't that kind of man. That he wouldn't throw himself into another woman's arms while we were still married, but then again, hadn't I done the same? When I finally dialed his number, it rang. And rang, no answer. The next morning, I saw a picture on social media, Marcus, at a restaurant, with her, laughing. Smiling, like our marriage had never existed. I couldn't let it go, so I did something reckless. Something desperate. I drove to his office. When I walked in, his secretary looked startled. Celeste. He's in a meeting. I didn't care. I pushed the door open. Marcus sat at his desk, and across from him, Emily. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Marcus stood quickly. Celeste, what are you doing here? My voice was shaky, but I forced myself to speak. Are you with her? Emily shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Marcus, his jaw clenched. We're working. That's not what I asked. Silence. That was all the answer I needed. I let out a shaky breath. So, this is how it ends. Marcus rubbed a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. I don't know how to forgive you, Celeste. And I don't know how to let go of my anger. Being with her. It makes it easier. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Emily stood. I should go. I shot her a glare. Don't. You already took my husband. The least you can do is stay and hear this. Marcus flinched. Celeste, no. You don't get to be angry. I made a mistake. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. But you chose to punish me like this. Instead of trying, instead of working through it, you ran straight to someone else. His eyes darkened. Like you didn't. Tears burned my eyes. I regretted it the second it happened. Can you say the same? Silence again, and this time, I knew, we were done. The divorce papers came 2 weeks later. I stared at them for hours, my hands trembling over the signature line. I thought about the years we had built together, the love we had shared, the children who would now have to live between two homes. But love wasn't always enough. Marcus had made his choice, and now, I had to make mine. With a deep breath, I picked up the pen and signed my name. The ink on the divorce papers had barely dried when reality hit me like a tidal wave. I was officially a single woman. No husband. No marriage. Just memories of what once was. I spent the next few weeks in autopilot, focusing on my children, my work, anything to keep myself from spiraling. The silence in the house was unbearable at times. But I reminded myself, this was the life I had to embrace now. Then came the news I didn't expect. Marcus was engaged to Emily. It took me a full minute to process the words when my friend told me over coffee. "It's all over social media," she said, sliding her phone toward me. I stared at the screen. There they were, Marcus and Emily, smiling in an engagement photo. The caption? She said yes. The betrayal felt fresh all over again, like a wound that refused to close. But instead of breaking down, I did something else. I smiled, because if Marcus thought he had broken me, he was wrong. The wedding happened fast. A lavish ceremony. A perfect bride. A groom who looked happy, at least in pictures. But life has a way of bringing unexpected twists. A few months into his new marriage, Marcus reached out to me. At first, it was about the kids. He wanted to see them more often. Wanted to be more involved. But then, the late-night text started. "I miss talking to you. Do you ever think about us? Emily isn't who I thought she was." I ignored him. Then, one evening, he showed up at my house unannounced. "Celeste," he said, looking almost desperate. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. What could we possibly have to talk about, Marcus? He hesitated. I made a mistake. I let out a bitter laugh. "Which one?" he sighed, running a hand through his hair. I thought being with Emily would make me forget what happened between us. But it didn't. It only made me realize how much I lost. "You didn't lose me, Marcus. You left me." I was angry. His voice was hoarse. Hurt, so was I. I swallowed. "But I still fought for us." "You didn't." He took a step closer. "I want to fix things." I stared at him, really looking at him. The man who had been my husband. The father of my children. The love of my life, and I realized something. I didn't love him anymore, not the way I used to, not enough to let him hurt me again. I shook my head. "You made your choice, Marcus. And I've made mine." He looked devastated. "Celeste, goodbye, Marcus," and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Life moved forward. And so did I. I started traveling. Spent more time with my kids. Rebuilt my career. Rediscovered who I was outside of being Marcus's wife, and when love found me again, it wasn't in a man who needed fixing, it was in someone who saw me for who I was, flaws and all, and chose me anyway. Marcus, he eventually divorced Emily. I heard he tried dating again. Tried filling the emptiness in his life with different women, but some mistakes come with a price, and his price was losing me forever.
Please subscribe, like, comment and share this video. It means a lot to us. Thank you.